Welcome to the #1 show and the source of truth for all things MedTech. Here, we reveal the secrets and stories behind the investments, science, and commercialization of the MedTech industry. Every week, we'll take you on a wild ride with the biggest names in the game, from entrepreneurs and investors who are shaking up the market to healthcare providers who are revolutionizing the way we think and practice medicine. So hold on tight and get ready for a journey like no other. This is the State of MedTech. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show, and this is a great episode because I love having former guests back to give updates. Now, Anne Osdoit is the CEO of Moon Surgical, who's a surgical robotics company based in Paris, France, who has a mission that is focused on the future of the operating room and how it lies in the hands of the empowered surgeon. And so they essentially have a surgical robotic platform that gives surgeons complete control with renewed confidence and adaptable technology to any situation. More specifically, it's a very different model and platform for surgical robotics. That being said, a little backstory is that when I first started my business a little over a year ago, Moon Surgical was actually my very first client. Jeffrey Alvarez, who is their chief strategy officer, reached out to me, and his request was like, "Hey Omar, we're going to JP Morgan Healthcare Conference," which, for those of you who don't know, it's the one of the largest investment conferences for the medtech industry, second only to the LSI Emerging MedTech Summit, by the way. Their issue is that not a lot of people knew about them yet. They had been stealth for a while, and so they had 30 days where they needed to generate a powerful company and product story, generate some awareness online, and that way when they go to meet with investors, they actually heard of Moon Surgical and were aware of the problem they were solving. So, long story short, we worked very hard. And again, I always hope for a company to have leaders like Jeffrey Alvarez and Anne Osdoit at the helm, because they really embraced and adopted digital strategies they were not used to, that they haven't done before, but they adopted them and implemented them, and of course, had fantastic results. Khateeb and Co. and myself, we only played a small part in that. But, long story short is that they were able to generate a lot of awareness, drive a lot of adoption of the story. And then, after a few months, we're able to successfully raise $30 million, which was a great success story. The best part, I think, is that Anne and Jeff and Moon Surgical have only continued to add momentum on how they use digital and specifically social media channels like LinkedIn to tell the company and product story, drive adoption in the market, and gain more traction. So Anne's coming back on the show to give an update on where they're at commercially, and of course, really exciting updates on her end. Last thing I'll mention before I get started is that if you're a founder or CEO of a medtech startup and you're looking to attract investors, drive product adoption, and at some point start building your sales pipeline, whether it's for your commercial launch or to show investors that you have commercial traction, please reach out to me. I'd love to work with you and show you how you can use network effects, very much like Moon Surgical, to drive that awareness on social media, and more importantly, attract investors at scale, drive adoption at scale, and grow your sales pipeline at scale. So if you're more interested in that, please check the show notes below or just go to my website, khateebandco.com. That's Khateebandco.com. Now, let's get into the episode with Anne Osdoit of Moon Surgical. Welcome back, everybody, and I'm very happy to have my good friend and one of our former guest back, Anne Osdoit, who's the CEO of Moon Surgical. Anne, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks, Omar. It's great to be back.
Absolutely. So, last time, it's been a while. So last time you were on the show is actually right when we started this show. So a little over a year ago. It was right before JP Morgan 2022, right?
Yep.
And so since then, you guys have had a lot of exciting news. One of the bigger news is that you guys successfully raised, I think, a $30 or $33 million Series A, which is great. But then just recently in December, you guys got your 510K clearance. So congratulations. and you just
Thank
did
you.
your first human trials. Yeah, so I kind of wanted to have you back on just to kind of share like some updates about what's going on with Moon Surgical, and then of course like we got to talk robots, you know. But yeah, tell us what's going on with Moon, and what's it been like for you having transitioned, you know, from the venture side into now you're full-time CEO at a surgical robotics company. So it's a lot to kind of catch up on.
Sure. Yeah, it's been an intense year, or 14 months since we spoke. We accelerated over time, and our initial focus was really to finalize the development of our first system and bring it into the clinic. We really wanted to get surgeon feedback very early on and be able to test our assumptions, refine our product features, and get really experience in the clinic before turning this into a commercial product. So
Got it.
that was our focus for the past year. We finalized the development of what we call our first in human system, so first in human master system, and brought it into the clinic in Belgium in April of last year. We started doing clinical cases in April, right around the time where we were closing our Series A. You mentioned we closed a Series A in the spring for a little over $31 million. So it was, we were an 8-people company at the time. So you can
I remember,
imagine
yeah.
thin we were stretched
Yeah,
during
yeah.
these few weeks, juggling between supporting clinical cases in Brussels and about to submit our 510K to the FDA. We submitted it mid-May, and about to close our Series A. So it was, a bit crazy. But we did all that in the spring, and then closed the Series A, and since then have been able to grow the team substantially. We're now 25 people in the company, about a small half here in Paris, large half in the US, and we shifted really our focus to developing the commercial system. From mid last year, really. We're still supporting clinical cases in Brussels. We have treated 36 patients to date. We will do a few more in the next few weeks, but we have really switched gears and basically started developing our commercial system, and are getting pretty close to finalizing that design over the next few weeks.
That's
And
really
in the
exciting.
meantime, as you mentioned, in the meantime, we of course had a lot of dialogue with the FDA, which
Well,
resulted
how
in
did that go, by the way? Because I was gonna say going through the FBA's with a surgical robot is not easy. It's very difficult. How did that go with the FDA?
It's good question. So I think it revolves initially a lot around educating the FDA about what we were doing. So we did, before we submitted the 510K, we did 2 rounds of pre-subs, so pre-submissions with the FDA over the past year, where we really went in and explained and described our system, brought in surgeons, US surgeons who could speak about what using our system was like, because we had brought them into our cadaver labs, and who could help us explain the FDA that our system was a lot lower risk than traditional robotics platforms, and explain why that was the case technically and from a usage standpoint, and get them comfortable basically with what we had in mind in terms of regulatory pathway, validation of our system, which type of data we would supply when we submitted our 510K, which predicate device we would use, etc. So we did these 2 pre-submissions, had some discussions with the FDA around those times, and so I wouldn't say we knew exactly what the FDA expected, right? You never do, but we had some sort of understanding, and took our best guess at it, and submitted our 510K. And so by the time we submitted our 510K, there was some, I would say, decent amount of knowledge within the FDA reviewer and team about what we were working on. They were not caught off guard or surprised. And so the dialogue we had with them was actually very constructive over the review of our file and all the way until the end. I will say one thing, though, is that we had heard over the years that usability and human factors testing is something that is becoming very central and critical for the FDA. Probably even more true for surgical robots.
Why is that?
Because well, the principle behind usability and human factors testing is to make sure that your user profiles, after the appropriate amount of training, are comfortable using your system in a way that is completely safe, and where they don't need constant supports. Basically, something where the level of training you provide matches basically the complexity of your system and ensures that it's constantly used in a safe way for patients. And it's pretty central, right? I mean, of course, it should be part of validating your system, and so it has grown into something that is pretty critical for the FDA, which we understood in our interactions with the FDA, from the beginning, and that is a part where we had done a lot, but we had not done enough. And so we had to redo, a number of things in the process, and so that was an important learning for us. It's even more critical than we thought it would be.
Got it. There's a lot of since you first came on the show, so the show's gotten a lot bigger. We got a fantastic audience. So I know a lot of CEOs listen to the show, and raising over $31 million is like nothing to take for granted. I mean, that's a very difficult thing to do, especially in this market. I'm wondering, what was it like when you were raising money? Like, what were some things that surprised you about that process?
So we started raising money at the end of 2021, right? So everything was fine. I mean, it was fine. Things were better, I would say. There was no war in Ukraine. And general, economical context was a lot better. And so, our initial few weeks of fundraising were very enthusiastic. We got a lot of great feedback. We got a lot of pitches and demos done. We got a lot of people in our data room. So things were going well. To the point where we received term sheets, and that's where the situation started to degrade because the war in Ukraine broke out, and people started having second thoughts about deploying capital in new companies versus protecting their past investments. So we realized really between the early days of our fundraising experience and the closing, which happened in the late spring, that there was a very brutal degradation, right? I mean, people were initially, getting, signs internally that they could move forward. And then, some of the early approvals got somewhat challenged. We had to rediscuss. We had to renegotiate terms. We had to find additional investors to fill the round, et cetera, et cetera. And
that must have been pretty stressful for you.
It's not unexpected, right? When you're raising money, I mean, these things happen. It's just that there was a lot of uncertainty and some level of anxiety and panic that really materialized as we were raising. And when we closed, and announced the deal in June, we could really sense that the world was falling apart in terms of fundraising and, in the VC world specifically. And we felt very, happy that it was over. Because I think raising money 6 months later would have been a lot more difficult.
Yeah, no, it's definitely difficult these days. When, I remember when you guys got started, and I have to commend you actually, because, around the same time a year ago, not a lot of people did know about Moon, and you did a fantastic job as a leader, really telling the story about the product, about the mission of the company and everything. Every time I get on LinkedIn, I see that you're posting updates, everything, which is really fantastic. You went through a lot of pitches, with investors. What's something that happened during those pitches that, I guess, let me just cut to the chase. We want to hear a really interesting story of and you don't have to name any names, but we want to hear some interesting stories, because there's always going to be some interesting story of when you're dealing with an investor or pitching or something. That's really what that's really what I want to hear. I want to hear some interesting stories, and obviously some lessons from it. But like, let's have some fun. Something interesting had to have happened during that entire time of fundraising.
That's a tough one, right? I'll have to think about it a bit more, but and going back to your point, pitching is not the easiest thing in the world, right? I mean, at least for me, right?
Yeah,
and it's
I think
something
it's hard for
tell
everybody.
my team all the time. No, it's something I tell my team all the time. You guys see me out there pitching, all day long, and on a screen or somewhere on a video, but you have to realize that it's not what I prefer to do, and it's not necessarily where I think I'm the best. But like anything else, it comes with practice, right? And my way of feeling comfortable doing it, and of feeling less stressed is just to practice. And so the amount of work that you put in your pitch and in your story and in rehearsal and this and that and in evolving things based on feedback is considerable, right? And I think it should really never be neglected. I mean, a pitch is something that is just constantly, evolving and getting better over time. And, I have spent days where I did, 5 pitches and demos in a row, and I was, still feeling as energized at the end than at the beginning, because it flowed, but it takes a lot of work. So it's something I think that I will definitely remember from that experience. Right, things get easier. Things get easier for sure as you do them more and more.
We're going into we're about less than 30 days out from like my favorite event of the entire year, which is the LSI conference. And so there's a lot of founders that are going to listen to this. What's your advice to some of the founders that are going to go through this process of like setting up meetings and pitchings? Any advice to them?
Keep it short, right? Make sure it's very simple and understandable. I mean, I like just, few slides, not too many words, and just, practice with anyone who's around, or with your own mirror, or with your own laptop. I mean, anytime you can. For me, in a way, having to fly to places and to the US for a number of these fundraising events or occurrences was a good thing, because I had so many hours, with bad Wi-Fi on the plane, where I could, think about what I would say on these slides and just rehearse. That would be my advice. I mean, it's nothing, I haven't invented anything, but I think it's just very, very true that it helps. And in terms of, funny things that happen during fundraisings, I mean, I can't really tell you. I mean, I've done many pitches and demos coming out of a plane with, now 9 hours of jet lag, and, basically, showing up in the pitch or demo room with my, sports gear out of the plane because the plane had landed late. I mean, the team is now very, very, aware that these things happen, and so another thing that I found really important was making sure that the team, and we have an exceptional team at Moon, could basically deliver the pitch, and the demos, and do that as well as I was doing it. And we have done, many pitches in the US and in Europe, and having that redundancy and making sure people in the team are comfortable with the story also helps a lot reduce the stress level, because, if something happens and, logistics are not perfect, things always happen. You have that coverage, and, people can convey the story as best you can. Yeah.
Got it. Well, let's talk a little bit about the money that you raised. So how are you going to deploy that capital? What are going to be sort of the most important things that you guys use that money for this year and headed into 2024?
So, the use of proceeds is really focused on finalizing the development of our commercial product, and getting it through regulatory approvals. We want to be ready to, have a commercial product that can be launched, in the next year, focusing on the U.S. market, of course, but also with some, level of experience in the European market. So, we are still very, very focused as an organization. We've grown, but it's really about getting to design freeze on the commercial system, executing V&V, submitting to the FDA, working on the CE mark, and then being ready for that limited market release that we'll do in the US next year.
That's fantastic. Do you have a date or more or less for when that's going to happen? And the reason why I asked is that a lot of people are excited about Moon. You know, it's a great technology, and especially it's exciting to see like a more of a different surgical robot come to market. So I get messaged all the time by people about when they're going to have a commercial launch here in the US, because there's a lot of people who are obviously interested to work with you and everything. So do you have a date for that set?
So the answer is no, because, you know, part of that process is, of course, related to going through the FDA again,
Right.
which is, you know, somewhat unpredictable. But the, you know, the expectation or the hope is that, you know, in about a year, we'll be ready to execute that limited market release in the US.
Got it. And then and again, if you can't disclose this, that's totally okay. But like, do you have, you know, because it's a soft tissue surgery robot. Do you have a set of specialties or procedures that you guys are thinking about going after first and really focusing on? Are you able to kind of, you know, expand more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look us up on the FDA website, you'll see that our first 510(k) clearance is not specific in terms of indications, right? It's right for any laparoscopy procedure, meaning abdominal, thoracic, urology, gynecologic. So it's very broad. That being said, you know, we have focused our clinical work to date on abdominal procedures, so digestive surgery, and more specifically on, you know, high volume, bread and butter surgical procedures such as gallbladder removal, hernia repair, bariatric surgery, appendectomies. I mean, these would be really, you know, the beachhead procedures that we'll go after when we launch. We have used our system in a variety of additional indications in GI, and, you know, it works really well, but we think our choice of indications is also very much related to our choice of setting or, you know, provider in which we will, you know, I think provide the most value, which are, you know, hospital outpatient surgery departments, ambulatory surgery centers that are owned by hospitals. And so that's really where those high volume procedures are done the most.
Why do you think that the Maestro systems could be able to provide the most value to those, you know, smaller but high volume procedure settings? Is it more specific to the business model or to the way the technology functions itself?
It goes all the way from the design of the product to really the business case for these providers and the business model that we're building. You know, the system is designed for you know, simplicity. It's designed for really becoming an essential tool in every OR. It has very, very low training requirements. And one of the things it enables is the fact that the surgeon can operate with basically total control of all the surgical instruments that are used, right? Which means that there is not necessarily a need for a surgical assistant in the room. You might still have a surgical assistant for some procedures or in some, you know, indications or parts of a procedure, but most of our experience, you know, actually all of our clinical experience, we've treated 36 patients to date, was done without a surgical assistant being staffed in the room.
Interesting.
And, you know, it's not a secret that, you know, surgical staff shortage is a big issue, right? It's the number one pain point that, you know, these ASC executives and hospital executives convey to us. Staff shortage in general, right? But staff shortage in the OR as well. And so having a platform that not only brings, you know, all the advantages and the benefits of robotics, but also allows a lot more agility in the way you deploy your staff across, the multiple ORs you have, I think will resonate a lot in these settings specifically. They're also maybe a little more driven by, workflow efficiencies. And so we think we can help there as well.
What's your, for the U.S. market, especially when surgeons see this, I'd imagine probably a question that you guys will get asked often is what makes this any different from the robots that currently on the market? So what truly makes Maestro different from the robots that are currently in the market?
So, if we speak about soft tissue surgery only, the main difference is really in the basic principle and architecture of our system, which is that the surgeon operates really at the OR table, right, next to the patient, as they would do in a traditional laparoscopic surgery. And they operate with their regular laparoscopic instruments. We do not provide instrumentation. And they operate with the surgical technique that they've learned, right? We don't modify them.
So I want to touch on that. So your robot, compared to other robots that are on the market, the other robots, like there's a big, sort of big business model is the razor blade business model, right? So you're saying that for the Maestro system, the surgeon is able to use their preference of laparoscopic instruments.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Yep.
Got it.
The ones they would use, if we were not there. Yeah.
Interesting. So I would imagine that, from a business model standpoint, that's a very attractive one, especially for these ASCs and outpatient centers, because, anytime you see capital equipment, the first question that usually comes up after how much does this cost is, well, how much are their disposables and all the things that are needed. So Maestro's thing is that technically the surgeon doesn't have to change anything about their workflow. It's just augmenting what they're doing. Because the other thing, and I think this is a big part about your system, you wrote some great articles about it, which I'll go ahead and I'll plug it in the show notes for the surgeons who are listening, that you're very focused on bringing the surgeon back into the center of the OR and the operating suite.
Yes, exactly. And the reason for that is because, there is really value to having the surgeon at the center of the OR. Not only do they typically like to operate, that's number one, but also, there's value in terms of situational awareness, in terms of communication with the staff, in terms of just, basically keeping things safe and efficient for the patient. It is, to some degree, counterintuitive, and sorry for the play on words, to put a surgeon behind a console.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. That's
but best way to preserve awareness and communication in the OR. So we've tried to really merge what surgeons like about robotics, the stable vision, the complete control over all the instruments, the confidence, the ergonomics, with what worked really well in laparoscopy, which is, the nimbleness basically, and being able to go through procedures quickly and preserving that workflow in the OR.
Fantastic. Yeah, and it does make a lot of sense that, in terms of not just workflow, but even the communication, it's very difficult to accomplish that when you're even 10 feet away, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Have you guys started doing surgical labs yet in the U.S.? Have you done anything yet in the U.S.? What can you tell us about that? Because I'm sure, again, there's a lot of surgeons who are following you guys on LinkedIn, and I'm sure that there are many of them that are thinking, man, I'd like to get my hands on the system just in the lab. So are you guys going any upcoming conferences you guys are going to be at by any chance, whether you're exhibiting or just there in person?
So, so I'll start with your first question. Yes, we've done a number of labs in the US. We actually, do probably more than half of our labs in the US. We do cadaver labs. We typically do them in-house. We have a whole facility set up for doing that at Moon Surgical Inc. In San Carlos in California. I
didn't know you guys have a setup in San Carlos.
Yeah,
that's great.
An OR setup essentially, and everything that's
nice.
needed to do these labs in-house, which is extremely efficient. And we bring surgeons in for these labs. We also bring nurses in for these labs when needed. It depends on what we need to test. And so we'll be doing, of course, more of these in the next few months with the commercial product as we go through its verification and validation. So we are always looking for surgeons to come and help us for these labs. So that's something you can reach out to me or to us about if you're interested. And then we will be present at SAGES next month. Of course, we're not a commercial company yet, so we will have a booth, we won't have a system, but we'll definitely have a few of our team members representing us and a first communication about our clinical experience in Brussels from a surgeon from Brussels. So we'll be around if there's people who want to meet us there.
Fantastic. And what about is SAGES the only one? Anything else for the year?
Not yet, but I'm sure there'll be more.
Got it. Going into your commercial launch, like just as a CEO, I'm sure there's all kinds of things that are top of mind for you, from the sales to the market, everything. What's something that that you're most excited about when it comes to your commercial launch?
That's a tricky one. Getting feedback from the field and trying to actually sell your product is literally, it's the litmus test, right? It's for real. In a way, I feel that what we've been doing until now was easy because we were not confronting ourselves to the reality of the market. You can make all the assumptions in the world on why people would adopt your product and what your business model is going to look like, but until you test it live and have feedback and refine it, it's just in your mind, right? So I'm very excited about figuring out what's right and what's wrong in our plan and adjusting. I think we have to be very humble and basically approaching the market, and we have to listen to people. I think our plan of doing a limited market release is precisely for that, right? It's identifying surgeons, groups of surgeons, providers, where we can develop that relationship, where we will learn from each other, right? We will learn from seeing surgeons use our system in real life, understanding what it takes to support them, understanding what it takes to have a system that is robust and reliable, etc. And they will learn, of course, from us as they implement these new programs. But this limited market release phase is really going to be about documenting, learning, getting feedback, and adjusting as we go. I think we're lucky that we can build that into our plan and that we have support from our investors to do that. And it's going to be, for me it's very exciting just to see how people react to it in real life.
I'm excited about it too. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So speaking about your investors, so I have your Crunchbase, so a lot of people are aware of Sofinnova. Sofinnova is a very big investor and supporter of Moon. Some other investors we have is Cathay Capital, Johnson Johnson Innovation, GT Healthcare, of course, very familiar with that, and Jan Fleuro. For a lot of people, it's interesting to see J&J invest in you guys because J&J just recently acquired, not recently actually, but a few years ago acquired Auris, and so they're really focusing on developing their own foothold, like in the surgical robotic space. Like, tell me about your thoughts on why do you think that they were interested in investing in you, and what does that relationship look like?
Sure. Well, I don't want to put words in their mouth, of course, but our interpretation, and substantiated by a number of discussions, is that they recognize the positioning we have for our Maestro system, right, which is probably very complementary with that of their own internal developments, right? I think there is probably no world in the future where you have a Da Vinci system in every single operating room where laparoscopy is performed. It's probably the same, type of conclusion for other platforms in development, including what J&J is working on. But there's still a lot of value to these platforms, right? I mean, they will be used in select settings for select procedures, and for things that our own platform, Maestro, probably cannot achieve today, and is not designed for. On the flip side, there is this huge market opportunity. Greater than 90% of laparoscopy procedures are today not assisted with a robot.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
Yeah, 94%. Right? It's
a
really,
lot of people don't realize that.
And these cases are done in different settings, outpatient settings, ambulatory surgery centers, places where, the hurdles of implementing and adopting a larger platform just make it impossible beyond the cost, of course. And so we are working on a solution that is really focused on the bulk of that market. And I think will serve a different purpose, if you will, right? For different procedures, higher volume, different types of workflows, a different business model, etc. So I think, the reason why there is interest from corporate players is that, we are building something that in a way does not directly compete with what's out there.
Interesting.
Creates a new market and extends the laparoscopy market, essentially.
And that's interesting you say that. I think aside from like your commercial launch, you have two products, right? You have a product for the market, but then you have a product for investors. And what most investors are interested in is not something that's going to be just better. They want something that's new and different that creates a new market. Do you feel that because of the way that Maestro is designed, both from the architecture of the platform, but also the business model, that this is kind of designing a new market, which is enabling surgical robotic procedures in these ASCs and outpatient clinics?
Absolutely. And actually, that's the first sentence in my pitch.
Really?
First sentence in my pitch, or in the current first sentence in my pitch, because it evolves very quickly, is, at Moon Surgical, we're creating an entirely new category in surgical robotics, and a category that really changes the scale at which surgical robots can be deployed and adopted, and, provides better care for patients while improving the top line for providers. I mean, that's, kind of the one-line story, but exactly.
So let me ask you, so you're, this is a topic that's very dear to my heart, which is, one is technology adoption, the second one being category design. If you're designing a new category, do you have a potential name? Like, what would you call that category? Have you guys thought of anything yet?
Of course. We call it Lab 2.0. We could find a better name, but I think the point is really that, it's about augmenting, what exists, but not entirely redefining. And I think there's a lot of benefits to, what exists today in operating rooms, but there's a lot of room for helping surgeons and their staff. Yeah.
The main use case, and again, for some of the audience that's new, because a lot of audience does follow Moon. When you go commercial in the U.S., would you say that the main use case for the platform is within general surgery? Would it be urology? I know it's not, there's not a specific definition for it, but just, if you had to, let me put it in a different way. If you had to predict where the technology is going to, technology adoption is going to happen within the U.S., who do you think it's going to be with, and why? Specifically on the specialty side.
Yeah, I think general surgery and bariatric surgery will initially be the sweet spots. And I'm saying that probably because, we have only done GI surgery to date. I think, we might find other sweet spots in the thoracic field or urology, gynecology, but it's, I think surgical robotics is one of these areas that is very much dictated by surgeons' experience and feedback. So, until we're there with these other indications in the clinic, it's a bit hard to predict. But, from our experience to date, I would say, general surgery, bariatric surgery are definitely very appropriate use cases for our platform.
Interesting. When you guys have so surgical labs are really great. There's something very magical, and next time I'm up in the Bay Area, I'll have to connect with Jeff because I would love to go to a lab and check it out. But surgical labs are they're very magical, very special, especially in robotics because you really get to the heart of what a surgeon likes about the platform. Very open clinical discussions.
Okay.
What were some of the aha moments that surgeons had when they were using the platform that kind of, for you as a CEO, got you excited and say, yeah, you know what, like you can see them, visualizing the future, and while they're using the platform, they're excited. What were some of those moments? What was it that got them excited when they used the platform?
So initially with our first generation system, it was really how easy it was for them to use it. They came in, they had, maybe 5-10 minutes of training. And
you mentioned in the FDA submission that the training requirements were low for the system. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
How were you guys able to do that? Because it's a surgical robot, usually it's high. How are you able to do that?
Well, we're not changing their instrumentation. We're not changing their surgical technique. So really everything they have to learn is how to interact with the system. But we have designed a system which has no button, no pedal, no clutch, nothing. The only thing the surgeon interacts with are the surgical instruments that are attached to our arms, and our arms understand, whether the surgeon is moving an instrument or just holding it still, but it's all done in a very transparent way. The surgeon doesn't have to provide instructions to our robots. It's the robot understands things automatically. So I think that helps a lot, and so. You could see the surgeons coming in our labs and really hesitating. Hey, should I touch this? Am I going to break it? And after a while, I mean, very, very quickly, they would just grab the scope and the retractor and move them around as they would in any procedure and let go. And, seeing, how natural it was very impressive, I think, to them and to us. So that was with the first generation system. And then more recently, we have implemented a feature where the scope itself is automatically controlled in order to follow the tip of the surgeon's instruments, so that the surgeon doesn't have to worry about maneuvering the scope by hand.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and so when we tried that in the lab, it was actually pretty awesome. We had a surgeon tell us, he was amazed by how much he liked it, and he never anticipated that he would like it that much in its first iteration. And he had this very comical way of describing, this Mario Kart thing where you would hit the turbo and you would be in overdrive, and and this way we would shave off a few minutes from every gallbladder removal. It was very funny and very rewarding. Yeah,
those moments are great. That's why I love surgical labs. So essentially, and this is I think when robotics is done best is where the procedure workflow isn't changed, but it's just like reduced. So it sounded like you guys reduced a few steps there just by having that tracking with the scope. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. And you don't have to use it systematically. You can enable it at some point of the procedure if needed or not. There's always the option to override it with manual control, but there is a control mode where basically you don't have to worry about repositioning your scope during the procedure, which I think will be helpful.
Does the system capture any data by any chance?
Of course, yeah, it's a gold mine in terms of data. Yes.
I don't know why we took this long to touch on that. That's my fault. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, the system captures essentially 3 streams of data. The first one is the OR environment. We have embedded into our system 3D depth cameras, which essentially sense the OR and understand where the bed is relative to our system, what the patient form factor is when the abdomen is insufflated, how tall the surgeon is, which type of instruments the surgeon is using, etc. So we really sense basically the surroundings of the system. So that's the first data stream. The second one is provided by our system, by the arms of our system, themselves. The arms of our system are very high resolution haptic sensors, right? So they measure the forces, the positions, the movements that are applied to the instruments held by our arms. So that's very unique, because it's not the way traditional robotic arms are built. They're traditionally very rigid. In our case, we're able to document, how much force a surgeon, is putting on an instrument. And so we really understand the intentions of the surgeon even before an instrument moves, which is very precious in terms of, the insights it gives us on various surgeons and surgical techniques. And then the last thing we constantly record, of course, is the laparoscopy video feed, which of course everybody gets, but is very useful to inform us on what's happening during the procedure. Clinical steps, clinical decision making, etc. Yeah.
And so, in a perfect world, let's say if we fast forward like 5 years from now, and you guys are sitting on a lot of data, what do you do with that data?
Yeah, it's not in 5 years; it's actually today. Okay. Our bias is to turn this data into features that will be actionable. I mean, in the sense that they provide immediate value, whether before the procedure, during the procedure, but something that can be very concrete to the surgeon or their staff. That's number one. And number two is features that can be accepted by regulators, right? I mean, it's great to have the most sophisticated data roadmap, but if you can't get anything through the FDA, it's really not worth it. So we're turning, this data into product features. As I mentioned, the scope control automation is, probably one of the first features illustrating that. The second one is automating the setup of the system, so that the system automatically sets up based on which clinical indication is to be performed, what the setup of the room is. What the preferences of the surgeon are, because surgeons have different ways of basically installing everything for surgery, placing their ports, etc. And so we have basically a new feature of the system where that setup is automated, and then we'll also learn over time from the preferences of the surgeon, of the individual surgeon.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think that's a good point, which is sometimes you can capture all this data, but if you can't get it to the FDA, there's no point. I think the other side of it is that I think a lot of companies will capture a lot of data, but the important thing is like, what are you going to do with it? Like, and I've seen this, we see this in marketing all the time where there's all kinds of data sets you can get access to. And it's like, great, like you have all this data, what are you going to do with it? So it sounds like you're actually using this. And I like that, to inform like what product features you guys should develop versus, sort of the old way of developing any product is, you go to a couple of KOLs and you kind of figure out that way, but it's very subjective versus just, this sounds like a lot more objective. So the first feature that you guys developed from the data set was to say, we should automate the scope tracking. Is that correct?
Yeah. Scope tracking and setup. Absolutely. And of course, then we spoke with a lot of, surgeons and made sure that, this would have value to them. But we had a pretty, clear idea about what we wanted to do.
Fantastic. So I want to be mindful of your time. I have a couple more questions. So one of the questions I want to ask you, this is actually for the surgeons who are listening. So we have a lot of surgeons who are starting to listen to the show. And one of the things that I think is important, because there's no book on it, there's no course, there's no any training, which is, as a surgeon, how do you become a great key opinion leader for a company? So if there is a surgeon who adopts Moon Surgical's platform, if you as CEO, what advice can you give that surgeon in terms of how do you be a great adopter, a great KOL for a company? So what advice would that be? Pretend that pretend that you're making a wish here and say, this is exactly what I would want.
Yeah. And, it probably means different things to different companies, but I think for us, it's about, building that, relationship and trust where, you can openly share feedback and data, right? I mean, as you said, I think feedback from, surgeons and their usage and, that having that open channel of discussion is super important, but also being able for us to document the metrics, basically, behind that usage, being able to understand what it takes to develop multiple surgeon users on the system, being able to understand system uptime, being able to understand how we should refine our training, how we should adjust our support to sites. I mean, there's a lot of things beyond just using the system in a procedure, right? It's about implementing this whole program, which can be, some of the questions are, very critical. Okay, how do you build a return on investment model for your facility? And some of the questions are very trivial. How do I replenish my drapes and instrument coupler supply in a way that minimizes the burden on the staff, right? And so I think, the right surgeons, for us at least, are going to be the ones who are willing to work with us in this, initial partnership to help us learn all that as we help them, of course, learn a system and adopt it.
Got it. Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. So, and couple questions, and we'll let you go. So, as a business CEO, continuing education is a big part of your life, right? You're always finding ways to get better. So, just out of curiosity, in the last year, any books or podcasts that you've sort of been listening to or reading? What does Ann Osdoit like to read or listen to?
So I listen to podcasts when I run. That's my thing. That's the only time of the day, or not every day, unfortunately, but it's the only time of the day where I have time for such things. And I've actually listened to surprisingly very focused podcast, right? I listen to your podcast. I listen to a podcast from Lucien Blondel. I don't know if you know him.
Lucien was on the show just a couple of weeks ago. He's a great guy.
So he has a very cool one. I listen to, fellow CEOs, commenting on their experience. I listen to surgeons also commenting on their needs. I don't know. I find it to be an actually, pretty nice way to, extend my experience as a CEO with adjacencies, while not being in the office. So that's my way of doing it. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time for reading.
Yeah, I would imagine, especially, being a CEO and everything, it's just, it's tough. And especially now that you guys are getting ready for a commercial launch, I can only imagine your days are going to be packed,
It's not going to get better.
It's not going to get better on the time side, but in terms of everything else, it'll definitely get better. And thank you so much for coming on the show again. We're very excited for Moon. It's always fun to watch how you guys are growing and, of course, gaining a lot of traction. For those listeners who are listening, I'm going to leave some links in the show notes. So be sure to give Ann a follow on LinkedIn as well as Moon Surgical. So that being said, Ann Osdoit, thank you so much for joining. And this has been another episode of the State of MedTech. Absolutely. And we'll see you all next time.
That was great. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for enjoying another epic episode of the State of MedTech. If you're feeling inspired and love this episode, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you never miss an episode. And be sure to give us 5 stars and write a short review, because that helps more people discover this amazing community of ours. If you're a company who has a executive that you'd like to be on the show, or perhaps you want to sponsor one of the episodes, shoot us an email at hello@khateebandco.com. Take care, and we'll see you next time.